Okay, so let's unpack this. I want you to do something for me right now. Just look at the nearest object to you.
Like literally right now.
Yeah, right now. Maybe it is a coffee mug on your desk, or maybe it is the steering wheel of your car, or, maybe it is just the drywall of your office.
Right. Just any ordinary object.
Exactly. We are taught pretty much from grade school physics onwards to see that object as dead matter. It is stuff. It is atoms. It is completely inert.
It is the standard materialist view, yes.
Right. It does not care about you. It does not know you exist. It is just a world of dead things bouncing off other dead things.
Which makes sense based on how we observe the world day to day.
But what if it isn't? What if that coffee mug is actually a collection of billions of tiny sleeping minds?
That is a massive leap.
It is. But think about it. What if the only difference between you and that mug is that your minds are awake and organized and shouting orders at one another while the minds inside the mug are just taking a nap?
It is a truly radical thought.
It completely upends our standard view of the universe, right?
Yeah, it does. It absolutely does. But that is exactly the fundamental question we are grappling with today for this deep dive.
We are looking at the nature of reality not as a machine made of dead parts, but as a vast, interconnected, throbbing mental network.
And we are doing this by looking at a very specific, very dense piece of source material.
Yes. Today, we're diving into a really unique philosophical text. It is called Mental Pantheism, or in the original Arabic, Wadat al-Wujud al-Lakiya.
Specifically, we are unpacking Chapter 9.
Right. Chapter 9, which is titled The General Mind and Partial Minds. And the author is a philosopher named Abdul-Jabbar Al-Waily. This was originally published back in 1964.
Which is important context,
Correct.
1964. And it is a rich text. Al-Waily is attempting something incredibly ambitious here.
He is not just throwing out cool sci-fi ideas.
No, not at all. He's trying to build a unified theory of everything. He wants to reconcile the physical world, the world of atoms, biology, chemistry, gravity, with the spiritual or mental world.
And he doesn't do it by just saying magic exists.
Exactly. Or ghosts are real. He does it by redefining what the physical world actually is at its most basic level.
He is not adding spirit to matter. He's saying matter is spirit, just in a different form.
That is the perfect way to put it. Matter is spirit.
So the mission for this deep dive is to really understand this worldview. We are going to look at how Al-Waily believes the universe is built from these mental units.
How they communicate.
Right, which leads to his whole explanation of telepathy, and then how all these little minds fit into a massive general mind that governs the entire cosmos.
It sounds a bit like science fiction when you lay it all out like that.
It really does. But what is so compelling is how logically he tries to structure it.
He builds a very rigid system. It is not just everything's a dream man. It is a rigorous philosophical attempt to explain the mechanics of existence using mind as the primary building block.
Instead of matter.
Right. He treats mind as a substance almost. Something that follows rules, has physics, and builds complex structures.
So let's not waste any time. Let's get right into the microscopic level of this theory.
The foundation.
Yeah, the source material talks about the fundamental unit of the universe. Now, in normal physics, we talk about atoms, electrons, quarks. We keep smashing things to find the smallest piece.
The absolute bottom level of reality.
Exactly. So what does Al-Waily say the universe is actually made of?
He introduces this concept of the Jawhara.
The Jawhar.
Yes. Now, in Arabic philosophy, Jawhara often translates to essence or substance or sometimes jewel. But in this specific philosophical context, the best translation we can use is the monad.
Monad. Okay, that sounds very Greek.
It is Greek. It goes all the way back to Pythagoras.
Really?
But Al-Waily is using it to describe the absolute simplest unit of existence.
So if you strip reality down to its absolute simplest component,
Past the atom, past the quark.
you don't find a hard, dead particle.
No, you find a mental monad.
A mental monad. Okay, we need to be really clear here for the listener. He is literally saying the smallest brick in the wall of reality can think.
In a limited way, yes. That is the crucial distinction to make.
How limited?
Well, Al-Waily argues that even the simplest monad, the absolute atom of existence, possesses the faculties we usually only associate with higher beings. It is not a blank slate.
It comes preloaded with software.
Exactly. Specifically, he mentions two key faculties that every single monad has: will and preservation.
Will and preservation.
Or irada and hifz in the original Arabic text.
That is a lot of baggage for a tiny particle. Usually we think of will as something you need a complex biological brain for.
Right, like human volition.
Yeah, like I will eat this sandwich for lunch, or I will go for a run later. How does a single microscopic monad have will?
You have to scale it back. Think of it as a fundamental drive, a primal drive to exist, a drive to persist in its current state.
Okay, so it wants to keep being itself.
Yes. And the preservation aspect is even more interesting because this is where he bridges the gap between psychology and physics.
Preservation meaning memory.
Yes, but don't think of memory like remembering your grocery list or your childhood pet. Think of it as conservation.
Like holding on to its own state of being.
Exactly. In physics, we call this inertia.
An object in motion stays in motion. An object at rest stays at rest.
Right, Newton's first law. But Al-Waily argues that this isn't just a blind physical rule, it is a mental choice by the atom to preserve its identity.
Wait, so it is actively choosing?
It remembers what it is, and it wills itself to stay that way.
Oh, inertia is basically just a stubborn atom refusing to change its mind.
That is precisely the argument he is making.
Yeah.
It turns a core law of physics into a psychological trait.
That is wild.
The atom says, I am here, I am moving this fast, and I absolutely refuse to change unless you force me.
And that refusal is the will.
Yes. And the internal record of its current state, the knowledge of its own speed and position, that is, the memory or preservation.
That actually makes sense in a weird way. It completely personalizes the laws of physics.
It does. It animates them.
But the text mentions that these simple minds are, well, the word used describes them as introverted.
Yes, introverted. This is a brilliant psychological insight applied to the quantum world.
How can a particle be introverted?
He describes these simple monads as being trapped in a loop. Because they are so simple, they have very few ideas.
Maybe just one single idea.
Exactly. And because they only have that one idea, they are wrapped up in themselves. They just regurgitate the same limited thought over and over again.
I love the analogy this source material hints at here. It is like a person sitting alone in a dark room thinking the exact same thought on repeat.
I am here. I am here. I am here.
Right. There is no growth because there is no input. They are just obsessing over their own tiny existence.
Precisely. They are slumbering in their own introversion. They are disconnected from the wider reality because they are entirely focused on their internal state.
It sounds like solipsism.
It is exactly solipsism at the microscopic level. They believe they're the only thing that exists because they simply haven't encountered anything else yet.
That sounds incredibly lonely, to be honest.
It is the ultimate state of non-interaction. And Al-Waily makes a strong point that they cannot evolve on their own.
Because if you are locked in that dark room with no windows, you can't learn anything new.
You are stuck. You are entirely static. This is why a rock does not spontaneously evolve into a poem.
The monads in the rock are too introverted.
They are stuck in the loop of being a rock. They are satisfied with the single idea of rockness.
Okay, so this begs a massive question. How does the universe get complex?
How do we get out of the dark room?
Yeah. If the universe started as a bunch of introverted loner particles, how do we get from a bored monad to us? To cities and art and complex biology?
Interaction. Friction. The text describes it essentially as a jolt.
A physical jolt.
A collision. When these simple monads collide or interact with others, they're physically and mentally forced to look outward.
The impact wakes them up.
It jolts them right out of their slumber. They're suddenly forced to acknowledge that something else actually exists out there.
It is like someone finally knocking on the door of that dark room. Or just crashing a car through the wall.
Suddenly you have to deal with something that isn't you.
Right. You can't ignore the car in your living room.
Exactly. Pain, impact, heat, force in this framework. These are all forms of information. The monad gets hit and it thinks, oh, there is another.
And that realization is a new idea.
Yes. That acquisition of a new idea from the reality outside itself is the spark of all evolution.
The text actually says that as soon as a monad gains a new idea, it becomes heavier.
Mentally heavier, not physically heavier on a scale.
No, it has more substance to it now.
It becomes more complex. It has its original internal thought plus this brand new external thought. It now has two ideas instead of one.
And this leads us directly into how complex structure forms. Because it's not just atoms clumping together randomly like mud.
No, it is organizing based on this new mental weight.
Which brings us to the next part of our outline. And honestly, this was the part of the text that made me look at my own hand differently this morning.
The military analogy.
Yes, Al-Waily uses a very specific, very human analogy for how biology and structure work. He talks about an army.
It is a literal military hierarchy. This is how he explains the formation of complex bodies like biological cells or human organs.
It is a mental organization based on strict authority.
Let's unpack the rule of leadership he lays out here.
Okay, so If two of these mental monads bump into each other, who is in charge? Do they vote on it? Is it a tiny democracy of atoms?
Absolutely not. It is not a democracy at all. It is a strict meritocracy of awareness.
How does that work?
The rule is incredibly simple. If two monads interact, the one that woke up first, or the one that possesses even just one more idea than the other, automatically becomes the leader.
Wait, one idea.
Yeah.
Just one single extra idea is enough to be the boss.
In a world of incredibly simple minds, yes. The heavier mind, the one with slightly more accumulated experience, naturally leads the lighter mind.
And the lighter mind just accepts this.
It submits. It is described almost like a magnetic attraction, but it is an attraction of will. The stronger, heavier will naturally dominates the weaker will.
Hang on, though. One idea sounds incredibly fragile. You are telling me that the only reason my heart beats in a perfect rhythm is because the heart general has slightly more ideas than the muscle cells.
Yes.
What if the general forgets an idea? What if a soldier cell accidentally gets a better idea?
That is a very valid critique, and Al-Waily actually addresses the implicit fragility of this system. He argues that this is exactly why biological life is so precarious.
Because it requires constant maintenance of this authority.
Yes. Think of it this way. In a room full of people who don't know where the exit is, the one person who have a map, even a partially drawn map, is king.
He doesn't need to be a genius. He just needs to know one thing the others don't know.
Exactly. The man with one eye is king in the land of the blind.
Okay, that makes total sense when you frame it like that.
So if we scale this up to a biological cell, it's not just a bag of floating chemicals, it is a highly organized battalion.
Al-Waily describes the cell as a collection of monads where one primary monad leads all the rest.
Think of it as the commanding officer in charge of a platoon. The other monads, the atoms that make up the cell wall, the cytoplasm, the mitochondria, those are the soldiers.
They just follow the will of the primary monad.
Yes. And the source material gets very explicit with this army metaphor. You have the commander-in-chief.
Which would be the primary mind of the whole organism. Like me, the human.
You are the commander-in-chief.
Yeah.
Then you have officers below you.
Like the organs, the liver, the lungs.
Yes, the organ monads. And then soldiers below them, which are the individual cells and atoms.
Here's the fascinating and honestly somewhat dark insight from the text. Without this strict hierarchy, without this chain of command, the body would just disintegrate.
It would dissolve. Al-Waily argues that the only thing holding your atoms together in the shape of a human right now is the mental authority of your primary monad.
So the glue holding me together isn't physical.
Yeah.
It is mental.
Correct. The glue is pure leadership. If that leader leaves or loses control of the soldiers, the atoms would just wander off.
Because they don't know what else to do.
Right. That is what physical decomposition actually is in this philosophy. It is a loss of leadership.
The soldiers no longer have a commander screaming at them to be a liver or be a skin cell, so they just return to their individual introverted states.
Or they drift off and find new leaders in the soil or the air.
That is wild to think about. It is like the atoms are only sticking around because they are being ordered to. Hold the line. Don't you dare float away.
Essentially, yes. It paints the human body as a totalitarian regime.
A dictatorship.
You, the self, are the supreme dictator.
Yeah.
You are forcing these trillions of atoms to act against their natural inclination. Their natural inclination is to just float around and be introverted.
But I am forcing them to cooperate and form a hand.
Yeah.
And what happens if I lose my grip on them?
Then you get a mutiny.
Amusing.
Think about cancer in the context of this philosophy.
Oh, wow.
What is a tumor? It is a group of cells that abruptly skanks listening to the central command.
They decide to go into business for themselves.
Exactly. They stop being part of the whole organism and start acting like independent rogue colonies.
It is quite literally a civil war inside the body.
A civil war of monads.
That gives a whole new terrifying perspective to illness. It is a failure of your internal authority.
Evolution, then, in this view, is simply the process of a monad gaining more and more ideas over time, becoming heavier and stronger in its will until it is capable of leading a massive army of trillions of subordinates.
So you and I, we are very successful generals.
We have billions of troops under our command at this exact moment.
I have never felt so authoritative just by sitting in a chair talking to a microphone. I feel like I should salute myself.
You earned your rank over millions of years of mental accumulation.
But this leads perfectly to a big question about the self. If I am this grand general, where exactly is my headquarters?
Right. Where does the commander-in-chief sit?
Which brings us to the next section of our dive, focusing on the human connection between body and soul.
The text posits that the brain is obviously the headquarters. But specifically, Al-Waily argues that the brain cells contain the most advanced, the oldest, and the most evolved monads in the entire body.
Let's clarify oldest here. Why oldest? Does he mean chronologically, like they were physically born first?
No, he means oldest in terms of waking time or experience.
Ah.
To accumulate ideas takes time, or rather, it takes a long history of interaction and friction. The monads residing in your brain have woken up the most out of all the particles in your body.
They have processed the most data.
They are the most alert.
Yeah.
Therefore, the primary monad of the human, what religion might call the soul or philosophy calls the self, resides right there.
It is the oldest officer in the army, the grizzled veteran who has seen it all.
Exactly. And the mechanism of action, how you actually move your physical hand, is described as a very literal chain of command.
The primary mind perceives reality through the senses.
But remember, the senses are also just collections of subordinate monads.
Right, so the eye isn't just a biological camera. It is a forward recon squad of soldiers whose specific job is to report light back to the general.
That is a great way to visualize it.
Mm-hmm.
The general receives the report from the eye, decides to act, and sends a command down the chain.
The will of the leader travels through the officers, which is the nervous system.
Down to the soldiers, which are the muscles. And the hand moves. It is a cascade of authority.
There's a specific example in the text regarding this that I found really relatable, but also a little bit spooky when you think about the implications.
You mean the absence phenomenon?
Yes, the absence phenomena. This is Al-Waily's proof that the self is a distinct entity from the physical body.
He describes a situation where the primary mind becomes deeply, deeply introverted.
Lost in thought.
You are daydreaming. Or maybe you are solving a complex math problem in your head. Or you are deep in prayer.
We have all been there. I do this constantly on my commute. I will be driving home and I will pull into my driveway and suddenly realize I have absolutely zero memory of the last 10 minutes of the drive.
Highway hypnosis.
Yes. I physically was not there. My body drove the car perfectly fine, but the general, was thinking about what I wanted to eat for dinner.
Exactly. Your soldiers, your hands on the steering wheel, your eyes scanning the road they were running on autopilot.
They were just following the last standing order I gave them, which was go home safely.
But the general himself, he was AWOL, absent without leave.
And what happens if something unexpected happens on the road while the general is AWOL?
Well, that is the danger. The text points out that in this state of absence, you might not hear a clock ticking right next to your ear.
Because you are tuned out.
Or, in a more extreme case, you might get injured. You get a bump or a scrape on your arm, and you don't even feel it immediately.
Because the general wasn't checking the incoming reports from the nerves.
Exactly. The soldiers, the sensory monads, they were doing their job perfectly.
The ear was vibrating with the sound of the clock.
The nerves fired the alarm when the skin was bumped. The soldiers were frantically shouting, "Sir, sir, we have a breach!"
But the ruler was looking the other way.
The ruler was absent, introverted back into their own internal thoughts.
And the text interprets this specific phenomenon as absolute proof that the self is a distinct, separate entity, right?
Yes, the logic is sound within his framework. If the self were merely identical to the body, it would always feel the body. You couldn't tune it out.
Because you would be the body.
But the fact that the self can detach and tune out the physical form proves there is a separation between the ruler and the tools the ruler uses.
When the ruler looks away, all that sensory data from the soldiers just piles up unread on the desk.
It creates a hard separation between me and my body.
My body is just the staff I hired to tell me what is going on in the outside world. If I ignore them, the world temporarily disappears for me.
It highlights that original introverted nature of the monad again.
We never really lose that, do we?
No. We all have that strong underlying tendency to retreat back into the dark room of our own minds. It actually takes active effort to stay connected to the outside world.
Okay, so we have established that I am a mental general leading a massive army of atoms sitting in my cozy brain bunker.
A very apt summary.
But clearly I am not the only general in the universe. I am sitting here talking to you. You are a general. The listener is a general.
Trillions of generals.
So how do I talk to other generals? How does my mind reach your mind? Which brings us to the next massive concept. Telepathy and the cosmic wire.
This is where the text gets incredibly interesting because it tries to demystify something that is almost always considered paranormal or magical.
Telepathy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Al-Waily treats telepathy not as magic, but as a strictly mechanical process. It involves actual physics.
And we really have to remember the context here. He is writing this in the early 1960s.
Right, the era of the space race, the Cold War.
The absolute ubiquity of radio and broadcast television. The world was completely obsessed with the idea of invisible waves carrying information through the air.
Radar, radio, television. So Al-Waily naturally uses the scientific language of his time. He talks about telepathy exactly like it is a telegraph machine.
That feels very vintage steampunk now, but it makes a lot of sense conceptually.
You have to remember his core premise from the beginning. The universe is completely full of mental monads.
There is no empty space.
Zero empty space. What we call the vacuum of space isn't an empty void. It is densely packed with these tiny, invisible living units.
The simple introverted monads we talked about earlier.
Okay, exactly. The ones that haven't formed into bodies.
So it is essentially like an ocean of mind dust, and we are just swimming in it constantly.
Correct. So if I have a thought, a particularly strong, emotionally charged thought, that thought physically vibrates my primary monad.
And because there is no empty space around your head.
That vibration travels from my brain, out through my skull, and directly into the unattached monads floating in the air next to me.
It jumps from one to the next.
Just like a physical electrical current jumps from copper atom to copper atom moving down a wire.
The cosmic wire, that is such a great evocative image. So a thought is literally a physical mechanical signal traveling through a physical medium.
And that is exactly why he argues that physical distance doesn't actually matter for telepathy.
Because the wire is continuous.
Whether you are 100 kilometers away or 1,000 kilometers away, the cosmic wire is intact. The unbroken chain of monads connects my brain to your brain.
As long as the initial signal is strong enough to push down the wire, it will eventually reach the destination.
Yes. Now, the source also mentions the concepts of ether and photons, which we need to touch on.
Right. Now, ether is a much older scientific concept. The idea that there was a literal luminous substance filling space that allowed light waves to travel.
By the 1960s, mainstream physics had largely discarded the ether theory, thanks to Einstein and relativity.
But Al-Waily brings it back.
He reinterprets it entirely. He is well aware of the physics of his day, but he argues that what scientists historically called the ether, or even what modern physicists call photons, particles of light, are actually just these simple mental monads.
Wait. So the light coming from the lamp on my desk right now is made of these little sleeping minds?
In his philosophical view, yes. Or, at the very least, these mental units are the carriers of the light phenomenon.
But that is mind-bending.
He asks a very potent rhetorical question in the text. If we readily accept that a human voice can travel hundreds of miles through a solid copper telephone wire,
or that a moving picture can travel invisibly through the air via radio waves to a television set.
Exactly. If we accept those as mundane facts, why is it so incredibly hard to believe that a concentrated thought can travel through the mental ether of the universe?
He just sees thought as another frequency on the dial.
It makes telepathy sound almost boringly mundane, doesn't it?
It does. It is like sending a fax, just beaming this thought packet to you over the universe's monad network.
That is exactly his goal. He wants to show that what we call the spiritual or the paranormal is really just a higher undiscovered form of natural physics.
He even mentions that common experience we all hear about. Sometimes we feel a sudden spike of anxiety when a loved one is in danger far away.
The classic mother's intuition trope. I felt a disturbance.
Right. How does he explain that mechanistically?
He attributes this entirely to a telepathic shockwave traveling through this cosmic medium.
So the loved one experiences extreme fear.
That fear generates a massive vibration. The cosmic wire vibrates violently with their terror, and your brain, being attuned to them, picks up that specific frequency.
It isn't magic. It is just a high-voltage signal hitting your receiver.
Mechanics, not mysticism.
It definitely provides a logical framework for that gut feeling everyone claims to have experienced at least once.
It brings the spooky to the realm of the rational.
But, okay, let's zoom out. Way, way out. We have established this incredibly complex network.
The micro and the macro.
We have the internal cellular network keeping my liver cells loyal to my general. We have the external cosmic network allowing me to send anxiety pings to you through the ether.
Yes.
But this implies a staggering amount of coordination across the universe. As all these trillions of monads are just individuals bumping into each other, why don't they just revolt on a cosmic scale?
Why doesn't the universe just dissolve into chaos?
Yeah. Why doesn't gravity just decide to stop working for a Tuesday?
That is the ultimate chaos problem in philosophy. And Al-Waily solves it by introducing the ultimate commander-in-chief of existence.
Which brings us to the core of the book, the general mind.
This is the universal intelligence. This is where the pantheism and mental pantheism really comes into focus.
The idea that everything is God or everything is mind.
The text makes a really elegant argument about the laws of nature. Gravity, chemistry, thermodynamics.
Al-Waily says these aren't just random accidents of a dead universe.
Right. Usually we think of a force like gravity as just something that is. It is a blind, dumb force.
But Al-Waily argues that laws are actually thoughts.
This is a classic philosophical argument, but he gives it his unique monadic twist. Think about the logic. A law is a rule.
A rule implies a consistent pattern.
And a pattern implies an intent or a decision. Patterns logically require a thinker to establish them.
Therefore, the immutable laws of nature are literally the ongoing thoughts of a general mind.
Exactly. He uses a very simple chemical example to prove this point. Water.
Why do hydrogen and oxygen always mix in the exact same proportions to make water, H2O?
Why is it always two hydrogens? Why don't they ever just randomly decide to mix differently?
If the atoms were truly just chaotic, dead matter bouncing around aimlessly, they would be totally unpredictable.
They would be free to do whatever they wanted. Hydrogen could wake up one day and say, you know what, today I feel like bonding with 3 oxygens and a carbon.
But they don't. They obey a flawlessly strict law.
And the fact that they obey proves they are subject to a mental law. They're actively following standing orders.
Just like the soldier cells in my body follow my general mind, the free atoms of the universe follow the general mind.
The general mind projects the thought water shall be H2O, and the atomic soldiers obey the command.
So the general mind is the ultimate dictator of reality.
Dictator, or perhaps the ultimate conductor of the cosmic symphony. And this concept brings us directly to his idea of the unity of existence.
The universe isn't just full of minds. The universe is one single giant brain.
One giant unified brain.
And we are what? Just wrinkles on that brain.
We are what he calls partial minds existing inside the general mind.
Partial minds.
We process partial ideas, small, localized things. What to eat for lunch, how to fix a broken car engine, how to explain a complex philosophical text on a podcast.
But the general mind processes the general ideas.
Yes, how gravity curves space-time, how light travels through a vacuum, how carbon bonds to form the basis of life.
It is that hierarchy, again, just scaled up to infinity. We are essentially the middle management of the universe.
That is a funny way to look at it, but accurate.
The general mind handles the big infrastructure projects, and we handle the day-to-day operations of our own little lives.
True, but there's a really beautiful, profound interdependency here that the text takes time to highlight.
It is not just a one-way street of authority.
No, it is not a tyrant mind that crushes everything beneath it. Al-Waily points out that the general mind actually needs the simple atoms and monads to exist.
Just as a human thinker absolutely needs their physical brain cells to formulate a thought.
Exactly. And conversely, the atoms absolutely need the general mind to provide order and prevent them from dissolving into pure chaos.
You can't have a conscious thought without a brain to process it. And you can't have a functioning brain without the individual cells. They're completely inseparable from one another.
He paraphrases this idea of unity very powerfully in the text. He writes, "The existence is a mental unity. There is no separation."
You cannot take the individual monad out of the general mind.
If you did, it would cease to have any context or meaning. It would be a soldier with no army and no war to fight.
And the general mind cannot exist without the trillions of monads.
Or it would just be a ghost with no substance to enact its will.
It is a surprisingly holistic view of the cosmos. It doesn't put God or the general mind far away in the clouds watching us from a cold distance.
It puts the divine mind directly in the matter itself.
Or rather, the physical matter is the literal stuff the general mind is using to think with.
Correct. And that is exactly where he pivots to back up this grand philosophy with some heavy hitters from the world of science.
Which brings us to the final major section. Science meets philosophy. The appeal to authority.
He is writing in 1964, remember, so he is looking backward at the massive revolutions in physics that happened in the early 20th century.
He wants to prove he isn't just spinning mystical fairy tales. He wants scientific backing.
He starts by looking at philosophical precedent. He talks about Leibniz first.
Now, anyone who is familiar with 17th century philosophy is probably screaming one name at their device right now: Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz.
This whole theory is essentially classic monadology.
It is, and Al-Waily gives him full credit. Leibniz is famous for the idea of monads being the simple, indivisible substances that make up the universe.
Al-Waily is clearly standing on the shoulders of giants here, and he acknowledges it.
But he isn't just a Leibniz fanboy reprinting old ideas. He actually has a bone to pick with him.
He does. He feels Leibniz failed to sufficiently explain why monads have different ranks.
Why is one monad a king and another monad is just a peasant cell in a liver?
Right. Leibniz largely fell back on this theological idea of pre-established harmony. Basically, God just set it up that way from the beginning, and we shouldn't ask too many questions.
But Al-Waily wants a mechanic. He wants a rational evolutionary process.
So Al-Waily introduces the concept of the struggle, the idea that you become a leader by accumulating ideas over time through friction.
You earn your rank. You aren't just born a leader by divine decree.
Exactly. It is a much more dynamic evolutionary version of monadology. He is patching the philosophical software, Leibniz 2.0.
But then he brings in the actual 20th century physicists, Einstein, Jeans, Eddington.
These are the guys who fundamentally built modern physics.
This is where he tries to ground his metaphysics in hard modern science. He quotes Sir James Jeans first, a very famous English physicist and astronomer.
Yes, James Jeans famously said that as we look closer at the universe, it looks less and less like a great machine and more like a great thought.
That is a direct bullseye for Al-Waily's theory. The universe is literally a thought.
And then he brings in Arthur Eddington,
who was crucial in proving Einstein's theory of relativity.
Eddington discussed how what we call solid matter is really just a construct of our mathematical measurements. It is a mental construct we lay over reality.
But the big one is obviously Einstein. You cannot write a comprehensive philosophy of the universe in the 20th century without tackling Albert Einstein.
Impossible.
How does he interpret Einstein to fit this mental model? Because Einstein wasn't exactly known as a mystical pantheist.
No, he was a rigorous physicist. But Al-Waily looks deeply at relativity, space-time, E equals mc squared.
The equivalence of mass and energy.
He interprets Einstein's work to mean that solid matter is essentially just frozen motion, or crystallized energy.
Crystallized energy, that is a very poetic way to put it.
Matter and energy are entirely convertible. They are the same thing in different states.
Okay, so follow the chain of logic here.
Al-Waily builds a very specific logical ladder. Motion and energy can only be truly described mathematically.
Right, physics is math.
And mathematics is inherently a mental concept. It exists entirely in the mind. You cannot hold the number 4 in your physical hand.
It is an abstract thought.
Therefore, if matter is just energy, and energy is just motion, and motion is just mathematics, and mathematics is pure thought.
He concludes that the universe itself is mental.
He states plainly the body is a thought.
If matter is energy, and energy is math, and math is thought, then matter is thought. It is like the transitive property of the universe.
It is incredibly seductive logic. It completely dissolves the hard physical barrier between the thinker and the desk they're sitting at.
Because both are made of the exact same stuff, mind, just in different states of motion.
One is fast, fluid, active thought. That is your conscious mind.
And the other is slow, crystallized, frozen thought. That is the wooden desk.
Exactly. It is a unified spectrum of mental activity.
Man, that is a lot to process. So let's try to wrap this all up and synthesize the journey we just went on.
It has been quite a journey from the micro to the macro.
We started with the tiny, lonely, introverted Jahara, just sitting in the dark, obsessing over its own singular existence.
Until it is violently woken up by the collision of external reality, giving it a new idea.
And then those awakened monads start organizing into literal armies, building biological cells and complex human bodies based entirely on a hierarchy of who has the most ideas.
And those bodies are able to connect with one another across vast distances via the cosmic wire of telepathy, vibrating through a sea of mental atoms.
All of which exist within the single vast general mind that holds the laws of nature together like one giant continuous thought.
It really is a remarkably complete philosophical system.
It aims to answer everything.
It answers the what, the how, and the why of existence. It completely transforms the universe from a cold, dead, empty place into a living, breathing, thinking entity.
So what does this all actually mean for us, for the listener who is maybe driving their car or folding their laundry right now, listening to this deep dive?
Why should they care about introverted monads from a 1964 philosophical text?
Yeah, exactly. What is the practical takeaway?
I think the most profound implication here is that isolation is a complete illusion.
We do often feel small and separate in a big, cold universe.
Modern life makes us feel very disconnected. But in Al-Waily's universe, you are never truly alone. Physically, you are intimately connected to everything around you by an ocean of mental monads.
The air between us isn't empty space, it is a bridge.
Exactly. And mentally, you are an active participant in the general mind. You are tightly woven into the fabric of a universe that is constantly thinking.
Your individual thoughts actually matter because they're made of the exact same fundamental stuff as the stars and the galaxies.
It makes the world feel incredibly crowded, but in a warm, good way, like the universe itself is profoundly alive.
It implies that if you whisper to yourself, the walls really are listening, because the walls are literally made of sleeping minds.
It restores a sense of inherent life to what we normally just treat as dead background scenery. The world isn't a wooden stage you are walking on. The stage is made of the exact same life force that you are.
That is a beautiful way to frame it. Okay, here's my final provocative thought for you to chew on tonight as we close out this deep dive.
Let's hear it.
If the entire universe is a single general mind, and we are just partial thoughts functioning within it, do we actually have true independence?
The ultimate question of free will.
Are we really making our own choices? Or are we just the universe thinking about itself through our eyes? Are we just the fictional characters in God's novel convinced we have free will?
That is the big question this philosophy leaves you wrestling with. And when you look up at a rock or a distant star tonight, ask yourself something. Is there a tiny mind trapped inside there sleeping, just waiting for the right collision to finally wake up?
Something to ponder next time you look at your coffee mug. Thanks for diving deep with us today.
Think it out there.
See you next time.